Chapter 1. The message came in so casually it almost felt harmless. Guess who just got back in town? She didn't even look up when she said it. Her eyes stayed glued to her phone, thumb scrolling lazily like she was reading something unimportant. But there was something in her tone, light, controlled, that didn't match the words. I was stretched out on the couch, the TV playing in front of me, though I couldn't have told you what was on. It was just background noise. Who? I asked, my voice neutral, but somewhere in the back of my mind, I already knew the answer. She paused, just for a fraction of a second, then let out a small smile. Not big enough to be obvious, not small enough to mean nothing. Daniel. There it was. The name didn't hit me like a shock. It wasn't new. Daniel had been a quiet presence in our relationship long before he physically returned. He was the guy from, back then, the one who always came up in stories that didn't need to be told twice. The one she described as complicated, which is usually just a softer way of saying unfinished. I shifted slightly on the couch and nodded, like she had just told me someone from high school got a new job. That's cool. That was it. No follow-up question, no raised eyebrow, no curiosity. Silence settled between us, but it wasn't empty, it was waiting. She finally looked up at me, just for a second. It wasn't obvious, but I caught it. That quick glance people do when they're checking if something landed the way they expected. I didn't give her anything. No tension in my face. No shift in my posture. I picked up the remote and changed the channel like nothing had changed, like the name, Daniel, didn't carry any weight at all. And that's where things started to tilt. Because she expected something, maybe not a full reaction, but something. A question like, oh, you guys still talk? Or even a subtle tightening in my voice. Anything that would confirm that I felt the same thing she did when she said his name. But there was nothing, and when people prepare for a reaction and don't get one, it doesn't feel like peace. It feels like uncertainty. She leaned back into the couch, but not as comfortably as before. Her scrolling slowed, then stopped, then started again, faster this time, like she was pretending to be distracted. He texted me earlier, she added after a moment, trying again, this time a little more direct. I responded, eyes still on the screen. Another pause, longer this time. I could feel it, the shift in the room. The way the air got just a little heavier, like something invisible had been placed between us. He said he just got back yesterday, she continued. From Abuja. Nice, I said simply. That was when her fingers froze on her phone. It wasn't anger, not yet, it was confusion, because now she didn't know what I was thinking. And when someone can't read you anymore, they don't feel in control of the situation, they feel exposed. She turned her head slightly, studying me more openly this time. That's all you're going to say? I finally looked at her, calm, steady. What else is there to say? For a second, she didn't answer. And in that silence, something subtle cracked, not loud enough to hear, but enough to change everything that followed. Because now, it wasn't just about Daniel being back. It was about why I didn't seem to care. And that question was going to bother her more than any reaction ever could. Chapter 2. Over the next few days, Daniel didn't just exist in the background anymore, he started showing up in pieces. Small mentions, casual updates, the kind that were too frequent to be accidental, but too light to be called serious. It started the very next morning. He texted me again, she said, standing by the kitchen counter, stirring her coffee like it needed more attention than it did. I was at the table, scrolling through my phone. That was all I gave her. She didn't respond immediately. I could feel her waiting, like she had more to say, but needed me to open the door first. When I didn't, she pushed it herself. He said the city feels smaller now, she continued. Like nothing really changed. I nodded once. That happens when you leave for a while. Again, nothing. No curiosity. No follow-up. No, what else did he say? And that's where the pattern began. By afternoon, it was another comment. He asked if I still go to that cafe on Adiola Street. That place is still open. I asked casually. She blinked, slightly thrown off. That wasn't the direction she expected. Yeah, it is. Good for them, I said. Silence. The kind that stretches just enough to make someone uncomfortable. At first, she still carried herself like she was in control of the situation. There was a quiet confidence in the way she brought him up, like she was testing something she already believed she understood. Like she was poking at a reaction she was sure existed. But reactions don't always show up just because someone expects them to. By the second day, she tried a different approach. Less casual, more direct. He actually called me last night, she said, sitting beside me this time instead of across the room. I kept my eyes on the TV. Oh, yeah, we talked for a bit. How long is a bit? I asked, not out of jealousy, just clarity. She hesitated slightly. Like, an hour. I nodded. All right, that was it. No tension in my voice. No shift in my posture. Just acceptance. And that's when the confidence started slipping. Because now it didn't feel like she was in control anymore. It felt like she was talking to a wall that understood everything, but refused to react to it. By the third day, the mentions became more frequent. Almost deliberate. He said I haven't changed much. He remembers how I used to laugh at stupid things. He asked if I'm happy. That last one lingered in the air a little longer than the others. I looked at her briefly. And what did you say? She held my gaze for a second. I told him, I'm good. Accurate, I replied, but something about that answer didn't sit right with her. Not because it was wrong, but because it didn't create any tension. She was waiting for friction. And I wasn't giving her any. By Friday, it was no longer subtle. She brought him up even when the conversation didn't need it. Like she was trying to force a reaction out of a space that refused to respond. We were watching something random when she suddenly said, "He's actually doing really well now." "Good for him," I said. "He's changed a lot. People do. He's not the same person anymore." I finally looked at her fully this time. Calm, steady. "Are you?" That question hit differently. She didn't answer immediately, and for the first time since this started, she looked unsure. Because now the conversation wasn't about Daniel anymore. It was about her, and that wasn't the direction she planned for this to go. She turned her attention back to the TV, but she wasn't watching it. I could tell. Her posture was slightly stiffer. Her breathing just a bit off. Because something wasn't adding up anymore. She had introduced a variable into the relationship, someone from the past, someone with history, someone with emotional weight. And instead of creating tension, it created distance, not loud, not dramatic, just quiet, and that quiet was starting to bother her more than any argument ever could. Chapter 3. By Friday night, she stopped pretending it was casual. You could see it in the way she moved around the room, more deliberate, more aware of herself. Like everything she did had a purpose now. She stood in front of the mirror longer than usual, adjusting things that didn't need adjusting. The kind of small corrections people make when they're trying to look effortless, but aren't. A different dress, not flashy, but noticeable. Makeup, light, but precise. Perfume, just enough to linger. It wasn't dramatic, but it was intentional. I was on the couch again, same position, same quiet presence I'd kept all week. The TV was on, but like before, it didn't matter what was playing. "Going somewhere?" I asked, glancing at her briefly. "Yeah," she said, almost too quickly. Then she softened it. "Just meeting a friend." A friend. That word hung there, vague enough to mean anything, specific enough to avoid questions. I nodded once. "All right," and just like that, I looked away. No follow-up, no who, no curiosity, nothing. She didn't move immediately. Instead, she lingered by the door, one hand resting lightly on the handle, like she wasn't fully ready to leave yet. Or maybe, she was waiting for something to stop her. A question, a reaction, anything that would confirm that this moment mattered more than she was pretending it didn't. "You're not going to ask," she said finally, her voice quieter now. I looked back at her, calm. "Ask what?" Her expression shifted, just slightly. "Where I'm going. If you wanted me to know, you would have said," I replied simply. That answer didn't land the way she expected. It wasn't confrontational, it wasn't defensive, it was neutral, and neutrality, in moments like this, feels colder than anger. She let out a small breath, almost like she was trying to reset the situation. "It's not a big deal." I didn't say it was. Another pause, longer this time, because now she was stuck between two options: leave and commit to the decision, or stay and admit that she wanted a reaction. Neither felt comfortable anymore. "I'll be back later," she said, finally opening the door. "Okay," I replied. "Be safe." That was it. No hesitation, no tension in my voice. Just acceptance. And for the first time since this started, she looked at me like she didn't recognize me. Not because I had changed, but because I wasn't reacting the way she needed me to. She stepped out, closing the door a little slower than usual. Like she expected something to happen before it fully shut. It didn't. The lock clicked, and the apartment fell quiet again. I leaned back into the couch, eyes still on the TV, expression unchanged. But the silence felt different now. Not empty, just clearer. Because sometimes, you don't need someone to tell you what they're doing. You can see it in the way they move. And once you see it clearly, there's not much left to question. Chapter 4. She came back later than usual. Not late enough to raise suspicion on its own, but late enough to mean something. The kind of late that suggests the night didn't end early, and definitely didn't feel short. I was already in bed when she walked in. Lights off, room quiet, my phone face down on the nightstand like I had nothing left to look at. The door clicked softly behind her. She didn't move right away. Just stood there for a second, like she was adjusting to the silence, or maybe checking if I was awake. "You're asleep?" she asked quietly. "No," I replied, calm. "Awake." There was a small pause. Then the soft sound of her heels coming off, one after the other. The faint rustle of her dress. Every little movement felt louder than usual in the quiet room. "I saw Daniel," she said. Straight to it, no build-up this time. I turned slightly on the bed, just enough to face her direction. My expression didn't change. "Okay." That was all, not even a question attached to it. "No, how was it? No, what did you guys do?" Just, "Okay." The word landed flat in the room, and you could feel it. It didn't go where she wanted it to go. She moved closer, slower now, like she was trying to read me as she walked. "That's it?" she asked. "What else?" I replied. Another pause, longer, heavier, because now she didn't know what to do with this version of me. "I mean, we talked for a while," she added, her voice slightly tighter. And we caught up." Good. Each response was simple, controlled, and with every one of them, the gap between what she expected and what she was getting kept widening. She sat on the edge of the bed, facing away from me now. Her shoulders were tense, even if she tried to hide it. "It was actually nice," she said, a little softer this time. That word, nice, was placed carefully, like it was meant to trigger something. I shifted slightly, resting my head back against the pillow. That's good. Still nothing. No reaction. And that's when the silence started to work against her. Because now it wasn't just about what she did, it was about why it didn't matter to me the way she thought it would. She turned her head slightly, looking at me over her shoulder. You don't care. The question finally came out. Not hidden, not indirect, just honest. I met her gaze, steady. About what? Her brows pulled together. About me seeing him. I held her eyes for a second, then answered plainly. You made that decision. That wasn't anger. It wasn't approval either. It was something worse. It was distance. She turned back around slowly, facing forward again. Because now the conversation wasn't going the way she imagined it in her head earlier that night. There was no tension to push against. No emotion to measure. Just space. And space forces people to think. You could at least ask something, she said after a while, her voice quieter now, almost unsure. I could, I replied. I didn't say anything else. Didn't follow up, didn't take the bait, just left the sentence hanging there. She exhaled slowly, like she didn't know whether to be frustrated or worried. Because now it felt like she was the only one in the conversation trying to keep something alive. And the more she tried, the more it became obvious that I wasn't meeting her halfway. Eventually, she lay down beside me, but not close. There was a small gap between us, nothing dramatic, just enough to be noticeable. And in that quiet, something shifted again. Not loud, not sudden, but real, because for the first time that night, she didn't fall asleep easily. And it wasn't because of Daniel. It was because she couldn't figure out why I wasn't reacting to him at all. Chapter 5. Morning came, but the tension from the night before didn't disappear with it. It just settled, quietly. The kind of quiet that doesn't feel peaceful, it feels like something unresolved sitting between two people, waiting to be acknowledged. She was already in the kitchen when I walked in. The smell of coffee filled the space, but it didn't feel warm. It felt routine, mechanical, like she was doing something just to keep her hands busy. Morning, she said, without turning around. Morning. I pulled out a chair and sat down, scrolling through my phone like I always did. Same movements, same calm, but now, she was watching for it. Every little thing. She placed a cup of coffee in front of me, then lingered by the counter instead of sitting down. I didn't sleep well, she said after a moment. No follow-up. She turned slightly, leaning back against the counter. I kept thinking about last night. I took a sip of the coffee. Okay, that word again, neutral, unmoved, and now it was starting to bother her more than she expected. He looks different now, she continued, trying again. More mature. I nodded. People change. Her fingers tightened slightly around the edge of the counter. He's doing really well too. That's good. Each response landed the same way, flat, controlled, impossible to build on. And for the first time, she wasn't just confused anymore. She was starting to feel unsettled. He asked about you, she said, watching me closely this time, like this was the line that was supposed to matter. That made me pause, but only slightly. Just enough to acknowledge it. Oh, yeah, she said quickly. He wanted to know what you're like. I set the cup down. And what did you tell him? She held my gaze for a second longer than usual. I told him you're good. I nodded once. Accurate. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't, because now she was waiting for something else, something deeper. A question, a reaction, maybe even a hint of insecurity. Anything that would confirm that this conversation meant more than I was letting on. But I didn't give her anything else. And that's when the shift became obvious. Her expression changed, not dramatically, but enough. The confidence she had at the start of all of this was thinning out. You're really not going to ask anything, she said finally. I looked at her calmly. Like what? Her lips parted slightly, but no words came out immediately. Because now she had to be honest about what she wanted. And that wasn't as easy as casually mentioning his name anymore. I don't know, she said, a little frustrated now. Just something. I leaned back in the chair, studying her for a second. You want me to be curious, I said simply. She didn't answer, but her silence said enough. And if I'm not, I added. That question hit harder than anything else I'd said so far. Because now it forced her to face something she wasn't prepared for. The possibility that this situation didn't affect me the way she thought it would. She looked away first, her posture shifting slightly. It's just weird, she muttered. What is, you? I gave a small nod, like I understood. Maybe I did, but I didn't explain anything. Didn't defend myself. Didn't reassure her. Because sometimes, clarity doesn't come from explanations. It comes from what people choose not to say. She picked up her coffee and took a slow sip, but her mind wasn't on it anymore. It was on me, on the silence, on the lack of reaction. Because now, for the first time since this started, she wasn't trying to provoke something. She was trying to understand something. And the more she thought about it, the less comfortable she became. Chapter 6. By Sunday, the atmosphere in the apartment had changed completely. Not in a loud way. No arguments, no confrontation, just different. She wasn't as talkative anymore. The casual mentions had stopped, but not because Daniel was gone, because something else had taken his place. Uncertainty. Now, instead of bringing him up, she watched me. Small glances when she thought I wouldn't notice. Pauses before she spoke, like she was measuring my reactions before even saying anything. It wasn't about him anymore. It was about me, and the fact that she couldn't read me. I went about my day the same way I always did. Calm, unbothered, predictable in every way except the one she expected. No questions, no tension, no reaction, and that consistency started to feel like distance. That evening, I stood up from the couch, stretched slightly, and walked into the bedroom. Nothing dramatic, no sudden energy, just a normal movement, but she noticed, because now, she noticed everything. "What are you doing?" she asked from the doorway, her voice carrying a hint of caution. I didn't answer immediately. I walked to the closet, opened it, and reached for something at the top shelf. Then I pulled it down. A suitcase. That's when the air shifted. Not slowly this time, instantly. "Wait," she said, stepping fully into the room now. "Why are you bringing that out?" I placed it on the bed and unzipped it halfway. The sound cut through the silence sharper than anything we'd said all week. "I'm packing." The words were simple, but they didn't feel simple. "For what?" she asked quickly, her voice tightening. I started folding a shirt, neatly, carefully, like this wasn't a sudden decision, like this had already been thought through. "I'm leaving." The room went completely still. Not quiet, still, because now, everything she had been trying to understand suddenly became real. "What do you mean, leaving?" she asked, slower this time, like she needed to hear it again to believe it. I didn't rush my movements. Another shirt, folded, placed in the suitcase. "I mean exactly that." She took a step closer. "No, you don't just say that like it's nothing." "Leaving where?" "Away." That answer didn't help. It made it worse. "Why?" There it was. The question that had been building all week, finally asked without disguise. "Why weren't you reacting? Why weren't you asking? Why weren't you fighting?" Now it had changed into something bigger. "Why are you leaving?" I paused for the first time, not emotionally, just long enough to acknowledge the weight of the moment. Then I looked at her. Same calm expression, same steady eyes. "Because I don't compete." The words didn't come out harsh. They came out clear, and that clarity hit harder than anger ever could. Her face changed instantly. Confusion gave way to something sharper, something closer to panic. "What are you talking about?" she said quickly. "There's no competition." I didn't argue, didn't raise my voice. I just watched her for a second, then went back to packing. The sound of fabric folding filled the space again, but now it felt louder. Heavier, because now she understood something she hadn't before. This wasn't about getting a reaction anymore. This was about consequences, and for the first time since Daniel came back, she wasn't in control of what happened next. Chapter 7. The silence after that statement didn't feel normal. It wasn't the quiet from before, the one filled with confusion and tension. This one was heavier, real. "What do you mean you don't compete?" she asked, her voice tightening as she stepped closer. I didn't answer immediately. I picked up another shirt, folded it with the same careful precision, and placed it into the suitcase like this moment wasn't chaotic, like it was already decided. "That's not what this is," she said quickly. "You're misunderstanding everything." I shook my head slightly. "I'm not." That calm response made it worse. Because if I was angry, she could argue back. If I was emotional, she could defend herself. But calm meant I had already processed everything. And that scared her. "There's no competition," she repeated, more firmly now, like saying it twice would make it true. "He just came back. That's it." I zipped one side of the suitcase halfway, the sound cutting through her words. "You brought him into this space," I said quietly. She froze, over and over again. "I was just talking," she said, but there was less confidence in it now. Exactly. That single word landed harder than anything else. Because now she could hear it. The pattern, the repetition, the intention behind what she had been calling casual. She took another step closer. "So what? I can't mention someone I used to know." "That's not the point." "Then what is?" Her voice rose slightly, not loud, but enough to show that she was losing control of the conversation. I looked at her fully now. Steady, direct. "If someone has to keep reminding me they have another option," I said slowly, "then I'm already not the only one." That hit. You could see it in her face, the exact moment the meaning landed. Her expression shifted, her lips parting slightly like she wanted to respond but didn't know how. "That's not what I was doing," she said, but the certainty was gone now. "Then what were you doing?" She hesitated, and that hesitation said more than any answer she could have given. I thought," she started, then stopped. "Thought what?" Her eyes searched mine, like she was trying to find a safer version of the truth before saying it out loud. "That you'd react," she admitted finally. There it was, simple, honest, late. I exhaled slowly, not out of frustration, just acknowledgement. "I did," I said. She frowned. "No, you didn't. I just didn't react the way you expected." That difference mattered, a lot more than she realized. Because now she was starting to understand. This wasn't a situation where she could control the outcome by pushing the right buttons. She had already pushed them. And instead of triggering emotion, she triggered distance. She shook her head slightly, stepping even closer now. "You're overthinking this." "Am I?" "Yes," she said quickly. "You're making it bigger than it is." I looked at the suitcase, then back at her. "No," I said calmly. "I'm just seeing it clearly." And that clarity, that was the moment the panic really started to set in. Because now she wasn't trying to win the moment anymore. She was trying to stop it from slipping away completely. Chapter 8. The room felt tighter now. Not physically, but emotionally. Like the space between us had shrunk, even though we weren't touching. She stood right in front of me, searching my face for something, anything, that looked uncertain. She didn't find it. "Stop," she said suddenly, her voice sharper now. "You're blowing this out of proportion." I didn't argue, didn't even respond immediately. I just reached for another shirt, folded it, and placed it into the suitcase with the same steady rhythm I'd kept since this started. That calmness was getting to her. Can you at least look at me? She pressed. I am looking at you. No, you're not, she said, frustration slipping through now. You're just acting like this doesn't matter. I paused slightly, then met her eyes fully. It does matter, I said. That caught her off guard. Then why are you acting like this? Because I already understood it. She blinked. Understood what? That I'm not where I thought I was. That answer didn't come out emotional. It came out certain, and certainty is hard to fight against. That doesn't even make sense, she said quickly, shaking her head. You're turning something small into something serious. I closed the suitcase halfway, then rested my hand on it. It's serious because of what it shows, I replied. And what does it show? She challenged. I held her gaze for a second. That you needed a comparison. Her expression broke slightly. I wasn't comparing you, she said, almost immediately. You didn't have to say it, I replied. You repeated it. Silence. That word hit deeper than she expected. Because repetition isn't accidental, and now she could see it the way I saw it. I was just talking, she said again, but this time it sounded weaker, like she didn't fully believe it anymore. No, I said quietly. You were checking. Checking what? If something else still mattered more. That was the moment everything stopped. No movement, no quick response, just stillness, because she didn't have an immediate answer this time, and that absence said everything. Her voice dropped when she spoke again. That's not fair. Fair, I repeated. Yes. Chapter 9. Fair, I repeated quietly. The word hung in the air longer than it should have. She nodded quickly, like she could rebuild control if she spoke fast enough. Yes, this isn't fair. You're acting like I did something wrong just because I talked to someone from my past. I didn't respond immediately. I just zipped the suitcase a little more, slow, deliberate, like I was finishing something that had already been decided long before this conversation started. That sound alone made her flinch slightly. I didn't say you did something wrong, I said finally. Then why are you packing like you're leaving over nothing? I looked at her then, really looked. Not angry, not hurt, just steady, because it's not nothing, I said. Her brows tightened. So what is it then? That question again, but this time, it didn't feel like curiosity. It felt like desperation trying to sound logical. I rested my hand on the suitcase handle. It's what you were looking for. She frowned. I don't understand. You wanted a reaction, I said calmly. From me. I didn't. You did, I interrupted, not harshly, just firmly enough to stop the denial. Silence followed immediately, and in that silence, something shifted in her expression. Not anger this time, not defensiveness, recognition, because deep down, she knew there had been moments, small ones, repeated ones, where she was watching me more than she was living in the moment. Waiting, measuring, comparing without saying it outright. I wasn't trying to make you feel bad, she said softer now. I know, I replied. That confused her more. Then why are you acting like this is the end of everything? I exhaled slowly, because now we were finally getting to the real question. Not Daniel, not the conversations, not even the timing, but us. What do you think happens, I said quietly, when someone realizes they're being measured? She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Because there wasn't a clean answer to that. I continued, voice steady. You didn't just mention him, I said. You tested the space between us with him. That's not what I was doing, she said quickly, but weaker now. Maybe not intentionally, I replied. But that's what it became. She looked down for a moment, like the floor might give her a better answer than this conversation. I didn't think you'd react like this, she admitted finally. I nodded slightly. That's the point. She looked up again. What point? That I didn't react. Another silence. But this one was different. Because now she wasn't trying to win the moment anymore. She was trying to understand what she had actually triggered. And the answer wasn't dramatic. It wasn't emotional. It was simple. Distance. I zipped the suitcase fully this time. The sound was final. She stepped forward slightly. So that's it. I paused at the door of the room, hand still on the handle of the suitcase. I was already here, I said calmly. You just wanted to see if I was the only one you still felt sure about. Her voice dropped. That's not what I meant. But she didn't sound fully convinced anymore. Because now the truth was sitting between us, quiet, unavoidable. And I opened the door. Not rushing, not angry, just done. For the first time since Daniel came back. She didn't stop me, not because she didn't care, but because she finally realized what her experiment had cost her. Chapter 10. The door was open, and for a moment, neither of us moved. Not because there was anything left to say, but because silence had finally replaced everything we kept trying to express in words. I stood there with the suitcase in my hand, fully packed, fully decided, no hesitation in my posture, no shake in my voice, nothing that suggested I was waiting for permission to leave. Behind me, she finally spoke, but softer now. You're really doing this. It wasn't a question anymore. It was acceptance trying not to sound like surrender. I turned slightly, just enough to face her one last time. I didn't wake up planning this, I said calmly. It just became clear. Her eyes tightened, not angry, not loud, just hurt in a way she couldn't fully hide anymore. So what now? She asked. You just walk out because I talked to someone from my past. I shook my head once. No, I said, I'm leaving because I stopped feeling like I was part of the present. That hit differently, because it wasn't about Daniel anymore. It was about what all of it had revealed. She took a step forward. I never said you weren't important. I know, I replied. And I wasn't trying to replace you. I know that too. That confused her even more. Then why are you leaving? I paused. Not for drama, not for effect, just honesty. Because I don't stay where I feel like I'm being compared, I said quietly. The words didn't land loudly. They didn't need to. They just settled into the space between us. Heavy, final. Her voice lowered. I wasn't comparing you. I nodded slightly, maybe not out loud. That silence again. This time, she didn't argue immediately. Because she remembered. The questions, the timing, the way she looked at me after mentioning him. The waiting, the watching, the expectation, all the things she thought were subtle. But weren't. I didn't think it would turn into this, she said finally. I adjusted my grip on the suitcase. It usually doesn't, I replied. Until it does. She looked down for a moment, then back up. And Daniel, she asked, almost quietly now. That name didn't carry weight anymore. Not for me. He didn't change anything, I said. He just revealed what was already there. That was the last real truth in the room. Not dramatic, not bitter, just clear. I stepped past her toward the door. No rush, no hesitation, and for a second, I thought she might stop me again. Say something different, do something louder, but she didn't, because she finally understood something she had been missing from the start. It was never about reacting louder. It was about what happens when someone stops reacting at all. At the doorway, I paused one last time. Not to reconsider, just to end it properly. I didn't lose anything tonight, I said quietly. I just saw it clearly. Then I left, and for the first time since Daniel returned, there was no reaction left to wait for.